quatre, cinq, six, sept, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 6, 7, 8, 9. 7, 8, 9. 7, 8, 9. 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
My dearest Angelica, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day. I trust you'll understand the reference to another Scottish tragedy without my having to name the play. They think me Macbeth, ambition is my folly. I'm a polymath, a pain in the ass, a massive pain. Madison is Banquo, Jefferson's Macduff, and Burnham Wood is Congress on its way to Dunsinane. And there you are an ocean away. Do you have to live an ocean away? Thoughts of you subside, then I get another letter, and I cannot put the notion away.
Take a break.
I'm on my way.
There's a little surprise before supper, and it cannot wait.
I'll be there in just a minute, save my plate.
Alexander,
Okay.
your son is 9 years old today. He has something he'd like to say. He's been practicing all day. Philip, take it away.
Daddy, look, my name is Philip. I am a poet. I wrote this poem just to show it. And I just turned 9. You can write rhymes, but you can't write mine.
What?
I practice French and play piano with my mother. I have a sister, but I want a little brother.
Okay.
My daddy's trying to start America's bank. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Take a break.
Hey, our kid is pretty great.
Run away with us for the summer. Let's go upstate.
The lies, I've got so much on my plate.
We can all go stay with my father. There's a lake I know in a nearby
I love
park.
to go.
You and I can go when the night gets dark.
I will try to get away.
My dearest Alexander, you must get through to Jefferson. Sit down with him and compromise. Don't stop till you agree. Your favorite older sister, Angelica, reminds you there's someone in your corner all the way across the sea. In a letter I received from you 2 weeks ago, I noticed a comma in the middle of a phrase. It changed the meaning. Did you intend this? One stroke and you've consumed my waking days. It says, my dearest Angelica, with a comma after dearest. You've written my dearest Angelica. Anyway, all this to say, I'm coming home this summer at my sister's invitation. I'll be there with your family if you make your way upstate. I know you're very busy, I know your work's important, but I'm crossing the ocean and I just can't wait. You won't be an ocean away, you'll only be a moment away.
Alexander, come downstairs. Angelica's arriving today. Angelica, Eliza,
The Schuyler sisters.
Alexander,
Hi.
it's good to see your face. Angelica, tell this man John Adams spends the summer with his family.
Angelica, tell my wife John Adams doesn't have a real job anyway.
You're not joining us, wait.
I'm afraid I cannot join you upstate.
Alexander, I came all this way.
She came all this way.
All this way, take a break.
You know I have to get my plan through
Run
Congress.
away with us for the summer. Let's go upstate.
I lose my job if we don't get this plan through Congress.
All go stay with our father. There's a lake I know. It's your place. Screw your courage to the stinking place. I can go. Right. Take a break and get away. Run away with us for the summer. Let's go upstate where we can stay. We can all go stay with our father. If you take your time, I'll make it hard to be alive. Close your eyes and dream when the night gets dark. Take a break.
I have to get my plan through Congress. I can't stop till I get this plan through Congress.
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course U.S. History, and today we're going to talk about the United States Constitution. And in doing so, we're going to explore how the American style of government became the envy of the entire world, so much so that everyone else copied us. What's that, Stan? We're not going to talk about other countries stealing our form of government because no other country stole our form of government? That doesn't seem possible, Stan. No, Stan, not the Libertage. Cue the intro. So today we're going to learn why the green areas of not America didn't copy us. All right, so as Americans may dimly remember from history classes, the constitutional system we've been living under since 1788, the year of the first presidential election, was not the original American government. The first government set up by the Continental Congress was called the Articles of Confederation, and it was, in a word, bad. In 2 words, it was not good, which is why it only lasted 10 years. The problem with the Confederation is that it wasn't so much a framework for a national government as it was a firm league of friendship, which unfortunately only sounds like a team of Care Bear superheroes. The Articles set up a government that consisted of a one-house body of delegates, with each state having a single vote, who, acting collectively, could make decisions on certain issues that affected all the states. There was no president and no judiciary. You can try to tell me that John Hanson, the president of the Congress, was the first American president, but it's just not true. Any decision required 9 of the 13 congressional votes, which pretty much guaranteed that no decisions would ever be made. Ah, supermajorities, always so efficient. But besides the 2/3 requirement, the Congress was very limited in what it could actually do. The government could declare war, conduct foreign affairs, and make treaties. Basically the stuff you need to do to go to war with England. It could coin money, but it couldn't collect taxes. That was left to the states. So if you needed money to, say, go to war with Britain, you had to ask the states politely. The Articles could be amended, but that required a unanimous vote, so 0 amendments were ever passed. The government was deliberately weak, which followed logically from Americans' fear of tyrannical governments taxing them and quartering soldiers in their houses and so on. But here's the thing, weak government is like non-alcoholic beer. It's useless. That said, the Articles government did accomplish a couple things. First, it won the war, so yay! Unless you were a slave or a Native American, in which case, probable boo. Second, the government developed rules for dealing with one of the most persistent problems facing the new nation: Ohio, which was called the Northwest, presumably because it is north and west of Virginia. Getting control of the land meant taking it from the Indians who were living there, and the Articles government was empowered to make treaties, which it did. Crash Course World History fans will remember the Athenians telling the Melians that the strong do as they can and the weak suffer what they must, and the Americans definitely went to the Athenian school of treaty making. Through treaties signed at Fort Stanwix and Fort McIntosh, the Indians surrendered land north of the Ohio River. The biggest accomplishment of the Articles government was the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, which set up a process to create 5 new states between the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. 2 things to know about this. First, it acknowledged that American Indians had a claim to the land and that they had to be treated better if settlers wanted to avoid violence. And second, Stan, can I get the foreshadowing filter? Yes, perfect. The ordinance outlawed slavery in all 5 of the new states. Still, the Articles government was a complete disaster for exactly one reason: it could not collect taxes. Both the national government and the individual states had racked up massive debt to pay for the war, and their main source of revenue became tariffs, but because Congress couldn't impose them, states had to do it individually. And this made international trade a total nightmare, a fact worsened by the British being kind of cranky about us winning the war and therefore unwilling to trade with us. In 1786 and 1787, the problem got so bad in Massachusetts that farmers rose up and closed the courts to prevent them from foreclosing upon their debt-encumbered farm. This was called Shays' Rebellion, after Revolutionary War veteran and indebted farmer Daniel Shays. The uprising was quelled by the state militia, but for many, this was the sign that the Articles government, which couldn't deal with the crisis at all, had to go. But not for everyone. Thomas Jefferson, for instance, was a fan of Shays' Rebellion. A little rebellion now and then is a good thing. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Which is all fine and good, I mean, unless you're the bleeding patriots or tyrants. But to most elites, Shays' Rebellion showed that too much democratic liberty among the lower classes could threaten private property. Also, people who held government bonds were nervous because without tax revenue, they were unlikely to get paid back. And when rich people feel like something has to be done, something is usually done. Let's go to the thought bubble. The first attempt to do something was a meeting in Annapolis in 1786 aimed at better regulating international trade. Only 6 states sent delegates, but they agreed to meet the next year in Philadelphia to revise the Articles of Confederation. The delegates who met in Philly the next year had a funny definition of revision, though. Rather than make tweaks to the Articles, they wrote a new charter of government, the Constitution, which is, with some significant alterations, the same one that Americans live under and argue about today. Despite Despite what some seem to believe, the 55 men who met in Philadelphia and hammered out a new form of government were not gods, but they were far from ordinary, especially for the time. Most were wealthy, some very much so. More than half had college educations, which was super rare since 0.001% of Americans attended college at the time. About 40% had served in the army during the war. But one thing they all shared was a desire for a stronger national government. The delegates agreed on many things. The government should have executive, legislative, and judicial branches and should be Republican with representatives rather than direct democracy. But the devil appeared in the details. Alexander Hamilton, probably the biggest proponent of very strong government, wanted the president and Senate to serve life terms, for example. That idea went nowhere because the overarching concern of almost all the delegates was to create a government that would protect against both tyranny by the government itself and tyranny by the people. They didn't want too much government, but they also didn't want too much democracy, which is why our presidents are still technically elected not directly by regular people, but by 538 members of the Electoral College. This system is so Byzantine and strange that when American politicians speak of spreading democracy through the world, they never actually advocate for American-style elections. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Yes, I know, you have fantastic elections in Canada. Yeah, right, okay, all that too. I get it. Okay, it's U.S. history, Thought Bubble. So conflicts between competing interests arose quickly at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, the first being between states with big populations and those with small populations. Large states supported James Madison's Virginia plan, which called for a two-house legislature with representation in both proportional to a state's population, and smaller states, fearing that the big boys would dominate, rallied behind the New Jersey plan. New Jersey. This called for a single legislative house with equal representation for each state, as with the Articles of Confederation. But of course, coming from New Jersey, it had no chance of succeeding, and sure enough, it didn't. Instead, we got the Great Compromise, brokered by Connecticut's Roger Sherman, which gave us two houses. A House of Representatives with representation proportional to each state's population, and a Senate with 2 members from each state. House members, also called congressmen, served 2-year terms, while senators served 6-year terms, with 1/3 of them being up for election in every 2-year cycle. The House was designed to be responsive to the people, while the Senate was created to never pass anything, and it was so masterfully designed that it still works to this day. However, this solution created another problem: who should be counted in terms of representation? Slaveholding states wanted slaves to count toward their population, even though of course they could not vote because they were property. States with few slaves argued that slaves shouldn't be counted as people because, just to be clear, none of these dudes were not racist. This issue was solved with the notorious 3/5 compromise. For the purpose of determining the population, the total number of white people plus 3/5 the population of other persons, the word slave was never used, would be the basis for the calculation. So, yeah, that's still in the Constitution. The Constitution also contains a fugitive slave clause requiring any escaped slave to be returned to their master. And this meant that a slave couldn't escape slavery by moving to a state where slavery was outlawed, which meant that on some level, some states couldn't enforce their own laws. Spoiler alert, this becomes problematic. But except for the tyranny of slavery, the framers really hated tyranny. To avoid tyranny of the government, the Constitution embraced 2 principles: separation of powers and federalism. The government was divided into 3 branches: legislative, executive, and judiciary. And the Constitution incorporated checks and balances. Each branch can check the power of the others. The legislature can make laws, but the president can veto those laws. The judiciary can declare laws void too, but that's a power they had to grant themselves. You won't find it in the Constitution, I promise. You can look for it. And federalism is the idea that governmental authority rests both in the national and the state governments. As an American, I am a citizen both of the United States and of the state of Indiana. And the national government, the one set up by the Constitution, is supposed to be limited in scope to certain enumerated powers. Most other powers, especially the protection of health, safety, and morals, are left to the states. But the Constitution also seeks to protect against the radicalism that too much democracy can bring. The mostly rich framers worried that the people, many of whom were poor and indebted, might vote in congresspeople or, God forbid, a president in favor of, like, redistribution of property. To hedge against this, senators were elected by the states, usually by state legislatures, and they were supposed to be like leading citizen types. You know, the kind of good Americans who take bribes and have adulterous affairs in airport bathrooms and patronize prostitutes and shoot Alexander Hamilton. Anyway, the other hedge against too much democracy is the aforementioned Electoral College, which many Americans hate because it has the potential to elect a president who did not win the popular vote. But that's kind of the point. The electors were supposed to be prominent, educated men of property who were better able to elect a president than, like, the rabble. But the Constitution of the United States is a really impressive document, especially when you consider its longevity. I mean, as Crash Course World History fans will remember, the nation-state is pretty pretty new on the historical scene, and the United States established by the Constitution is actually one of the oldest ones. But the Constitution would be meaningless if it hadn't been ratified, which it was, but not without a fight that helped clarify America's political ideology. 9 out of the 13 states were required to ratify the Constitution, and special conventions called for the purpose. In order to convince the delegates to vote for it, 3 of the framers, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, wrote a series of 85 essays that together are known as the Federalist Papers. Taken together, they're a powerful and ultimately persuasive argument for why a strong national government is necessary and ultimately not a threat to people's liberty. Oh, it's time for the mystery document? The rules here are simple. If I name the author of the mystery document, shock as in surprise. If I don't, shock as in Alright, Stan, let's see what we got here. If circumstances should at any time oblige the government to form an army of any magnitude, that army can never be formidable to the liberties of the people while there is a large body of citizens, little, if at all, inferior to them in discipline and the use of arms, who stand ready to defend their own rights and those of their fellow citizens. This appears to me the only substitute that can be devised for a standing army and the best possible security against it, if it should exist. Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton. Yes! Too easy, Stan, although I appreciate the opportunity for a rant. The whole idea of the Second Amendment was that the people could protect themselves from a standing army by being equally well armed, which these days would mean not that citizens should have the right to buy assault rifles, but that they should have the right to buy, like, unmanned drones and arguably suitcase nukes. And by the way, in the Constitution, this is not listed as a privilege, it is listed as a right. And as a right, if I can't afford my own Predator drone, I guess the government should buy one for me. It's almost as if Alexander Hamilton had no way of knowing that weaponry would one day advance past the musket. P.S. You know how Alexander Hamilton died? Gunshot! Sorry, I had to. I am on a roll. So it would be easy to ignore the people who opposed the Constitution because, you know, they lost. But some of the ideas of these so-called anti-federalists were particularly powerful, and they deserve a bit of attention. Anti-federalists, unlike the mostly wealthy federalists, were usually supported by common people, small farmers who weren't as involved in commercial activity. They saw less need for a strong national government that would foster trade and protect creditors. And the anti-federalists were very afraid of a strong government, especially one dominated by the wealthy. Writers like James Winthrop held that a large group of United States would be like an empire, and that no extensive empire can be governed upon republican principles. As evidence, he could point to Britain, or all the way back to Rome. Smaller, more local governments are more responsive to the people and better able to protect their rights. To the anti-federalists, that meant state governments. And while ultimately the Federalists won out and the Constitution was ratified, the issue of how large government should be did not go away. So the Constitution was really only a starting point. It's a vague document, and the details would be worked out in the political process, and then on the battlefield. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. Crash Course is produced and directed by Stan Muller. Our script supervisor is Meredith Danko. The show is written by my high school history teacher, Raoul Meyer, and myself, edited by Stan and Mark Olson. The associate producer is Danica Johnson, and our graphics team is Thought Bubble. If you have questions about today's video or anything about American history, good news, there are historians in comments, so ask away. Thanks for watching Crash Course, and as we say in my hometown, don't forget to be awesome.
Seventeen. 1789. How does the bastard, orphan, immigrant, decorated war vet unite the colonies through more debt? Fight the other founding fathers till he has to forfeit. Have it all, lose it all. You ready for more yet? Treasury Secretary, Washington's the president. Every American experiment sets a precedent. Not so fast, someone came along to resist him. Pissed him off until we had a two-party system. You haven't met him yet, you haven't had the chance, cause he's been kicking ass as the ambassador to France. But someone's gotta keep the American promise. You simply must meet Thomas.
Thomas Jefferson's coming home.
Thomas Jefferson's coming home.
Thomas Jefferson's coming home.
Thomas Jefferson's coming home.
Thomas Jefferson's coming home. Lord, he's been off in Paris for so long.
France is following us to revolution. There is no more status quo. But but the sun comes up and the world still spins. I helped Lafayette draft a declaration, then I said I gotta go. I gotta be in Monticello. Now the work at home begins. So what did I miss? What did I miss? Virginia, my home sweet home, I wanna give you a kiss. I've been in Paris meeting lots of different ladies. I guess I basically missed the late 80s. I traveled the wide, wide world and came back to this. There's a letter on my desk from the president. Haven't even put my bag down yet. Sally BLM, darling, won't you open it? It says the president's assembling a cabinet, and then I end up being the Secretary of State. Great, and I'm already Senate approved. I just got home and now I'm headed up to New York. Headed to New York, headed to New York. Looking at the rolling fields, I can't believe that we are free. Ready to face whatever's awaiting me in NYC. But who's waiting for me when I step into place? My friend James Madison, red in the face. He grabs my arm and I respond, what's going on?
Thomas, we are engaged in a battle for our nation's very soul. Can you get us out of the mess we're in? Hamilton's new financial plan is nothing less than government control. I've been fighting for the South alone. Where have you been?
France?
We have to win.
Well, what did I miss?
What did I miss?
What did I miss?
Come home to this.
Head first into a political abyss.
Head first into the abyss.
I had my first cabinet meeting today. I guess I better think of something to say. I'm already on my way to get to the bottom of this.
What did I miss?
Mr. Jefferson, welcome home.
Mr. Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton.
Mr. Jefferson, welcome home. Mr. Jefferson, welcome home, sir. You've been off in Paris for so long.
So what did I miss?
Hey guys, welcome to Hip Use History. We're gonna knock you up with some feds and anti-feds in this quick lecture, guys. We've touched upon it in other lectures, but I think it deserves special focus because it's muy importante. So giddy up for the learning, guys. Why don't we go get her done right now? Feds and anti-feds. So, the summer of 1787 is going to bring us to these two groups, the Feds and the Anti-Feds, during the Constitutional Convention, really during the ratification process. You have to remember that the delegates of the convention in 1787 in Philadelphia that wrote that Constitution did it by bypassing the old Constitution. They violated the Articles of Confederation where you needed 13 out of 13 states agreeing in order to amend itself. So they're not amending the Articles of Confederation, they're throwing that stuff in the garbage and they're starting all over, which is revolutionary and illegal. But either way you cut it, they write that Constitution, and certainly you can go watch other videos that talk about what they put in that Constitution, but the main concept is they're strengthening the role of the federal government. In a sense, they're really creating centralized authority with taxing power, and that's a pretty big deal. So when they go to ratify that sucker, we have basically two groups that kind of break out. We have the Federalists, which becomes the Federalist Party. Really, the only Federalist president was John Adams. James Madison was a Federalist originally. I think George Washington would probably classify him as a Federalist. But you also have big names like Alexander Hamilton. You have John Jay. You have some big, heavy hitters that are going to argue in those Federalist Papers, those 85 essays, that this is the right balance in federalism, and this is what we need. We need a large republic with a stronger central government to be the glue to keep us all together. And you know, even in the ratification process, it shows you a lot in terms of them really seeing us a country of people. They don't go to the state legislatures for this Constitutional Convention ratification process. They go to people conventions in the states. And all states had elections where they elected delegates to this new convention, and each state voted. And eventually, 9 out of 13 states were needed to ratify that, and they kind of just made that number up. But Federalists are going to be the ones who wrote the Constitution and who believe in this stronger role of the federal government, a larger republic. You know, if anything, they would say the states have a role, the states have the Senate. The Senate was elected by state legislatures. They represent the states. The House represents the people. This is the perfect balance. But when we go to that ratification process, we also have a large number of people that are turning against this new Constitution, and they are labeled anti-federalists. Originally, they wanted to be called the Federalists because they thought they had the right balance, but they got nicknamed the anti-feds, so there you go. We have anti-feds like Samuel Adams, Patrick Henry, William Randolph, George Clinton, George Mason, and even Thomas Jefferson, even though they shipped him off to Paris. The anti-feds' main argument is, number one, this is an illegal move. Number two, where are our liberties? We don't trust this new big federal government. They're going to take our rights away. And they're not going to be looking out for the interest of the smaller states, of the rural areas. And that's really what's represented by the anti-feds, rural America, the South, farmers, debtors, as opposed to the Federalists, who are really represented by manufacturers and artisans and big city interests. So that's the main two groups, guys. The Federalists, which support the new federal Constitution, and you have the anti-feds, who are really in love with the Articles of Confederation, and if anything, would be okay with maybe amending that document, but certainly not throwing it out, baby, with the bathwater. So what's going to happen? Well, eventually it's going to get ratified with 9 out of 13 states, and a Bill of Rights is going to be added to the Constitution in order to garner the rest of the support, all 13 states eventually, and that's going to protect those civil liberties from the federal government, as well as maintaining in the 9th and 10th Amendments some state power, so some of those fears of the anti-feds could be calmed down a little bit. So what happens after that? The Federalist Party runs its course. We have John Adams, and after that it kind of dies away. It becomes the Whigs, and eventually it's kind of reborn as a Northern nationalistic Republican Party. What happens to the anti-feds? They label themselves the Anti-Administrational Party, and later become Jeffersonian Republicans or the Democratic Republicans, and that's the forerunner of the Democratic Party of the South, Andrew Jackson. So there you go, guys. We hope you know a little bit more about the feds and the anti-feds, and giddy up for that. So we'll see you guys next time that you press my buttons, and always remember, where attention goes, energy flows.
After the war, I went back to New York.
After the war, I went back to New York.
I finished up my studies and I practiced law.
I practiced law, Burr worked next door.
Even though we started at the very same time, Alexander Hamilton began to climb. How to account for his rise to the top? Man, the man is non-stop.
Gentlemen of the jury, I'm curious, bear with me. Are you aware that we're making history? This is the first murder trial of our brand new nation, the liberty behind the liberation. I intend to prove beyond the shadow of a doubt with my assistant counsel.
Co-counsel Hamilton, sit down. Our client Larry Weeks is innocent. Call your first witness. That's all you had to say.
Okay, one more thing.
Why do you assume you're the smartest in the room? Why do you assume you're the smartest in the room? Why do you assume you're the smartest in the room? Soon that attitude may be your doom. Why do you write like you're running out of time? Write day and night like you're running out of time. Every day you fight like you're running out of time. Keep on fighting in the meantime.
Non-stop. Corruption's such an old song that we can sing along in harmony. And nowhere is it stronger than in Albany. These colonies, economies increasingly stalling. And honestly, that's why public service seems to be calling me. I practiced the law, practically perfected it. I've seen injustice in the world and I've corrected it. Now for a strong central democracy. If not, then I'll be Socrates throwing verbal rocks at these mediocrities.
Hamilton at the Constitutional Convention.
I was chosen for the Constitutional Convention.
There is a New York junior delegate.
Now what I'm gonna say may sound indelicate.
He goes and proposes his own form of government. His own plan for a new form of government. Talks for 6 hours, the convention is listless.
Bright young man. Yo, who the F is this?
Why do you always say what you believe? Why do you always say what you believe? Every proclamation guarantees free ammunition for your enemies. Why do you write like it's going out of style? Write day and night like it's going out of style.
Every day you fight like it's going out of style. Do what you do.
Alexander?
Aaron Burr, sir.
Well, it's the middle of the night.
Can we confer, sir?
Is this a legal matter?
Yes, and it's important to me.
What do you need?
Burr, you're a better lawyer than me.
Okay.
I know I talk too much. I'm abrasive. You're incredible in court. You're succinct, persuasive. My client needs a strong defense. You're the solution.
Who's your client?
The new U.S. Constitution?
No.
Hear me out.
No way.
A series of essays anonymously published defending the document to the public.
No one will read it.
I disagree.
And if it fails?
Burr, that's why we need it.
The Constitution's a mess.
So it needs amendments.
It's full of contradictions.
So is independence. We have to start somewhere.
No. No way.
You're making a mistake.
Good night.
Hey, what are you waiting for? What do you stall for?
What?
We won the war. What was it all for? Do you support this Constitution?
Of course.
Then defend it.
And what if you're backing the wrong horse?
Burr, we studied and we fought and we killed for the notion of a nation we now get to build. For once in your life, take a stand with pride. I don't understand how you stand to the side.
I'll keep all my plans close to my chest. I'll wait here and see which way the wind will blow. I'm taking my time watching the afterbirth of a nation, watching the tension grow.
I am sailing off to London. I am accompanied by someone who always pays. I have found a wealthy husband who will keep me in comfort for all my days. He is not a lot of fun, but there's no one who can match you for turn of phrase. My Alexander, don't forget to ride. Look at where you are. Look at where you started. The fact that you're alive is a miracle. To stay alive, that would be enough. And if your wife could share a fraction of your time, if I could grant you peace of mind, would that be enough?
Alexander joins forces with James Madison and John Jay to write a series of essays defending the new United States Constitution entitled The Federalist Papers. The plan was to write a total of 25 essays, the work divided evenly among the three men. In the end, they wrote 85 essays in the span of 6 months. John Jay got sick after writing 5. James Madison wrote 29. Hamilton wrote the other 51. How do you write like you're running out of time? Write day and night like you're running out of time. Every day you fight like you're running out of time. Like you're running out of time. Are you running out of time?
How do you write like tomorrow won't arrive? How do you write like you need it to survive? How do you write every second you're alive? Every second you're alive. Every second you're alive.
They're asking me to lead. I'm doing the best I can to get the people that I need. I'm asking you to be my right hand,
Treasury
man.
or state?
I know it's a lot to ask.
Treasury or
to
state?
leave behind the world, you know.
Sir, do you want me to run the Treasury or State Department?
Treasury. Let's go.
Alexander,
I have to leave.
Alexander.
Look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now.
Helpless.
They are asking me to leave.
Look around. Isn't this enough? He will never be satisfied. He will never be satisfied. Satisfied.
History
Welcome to Mission Possible 21G. My name is Mr. Review, and I am here to make the complex simple and the confusing clear. Today we look at Federalist number 1. Here, Alexander Hamilton sets the table for us. The endgame for Hamilton, the endgame for us, is a better government. The question in 1787, as well as now, is whether societies are capable or not of establishing good government. For Hamilton, the answer was yes, but how? The Federalist Papers were intended to be a nudge to those recalcitrant citizens who, for reason Hamilton tries to avoid, were opposed to junking the Articles of Confederation. But as Hamilton here makes clear, the Articles have not worked. Good government was eluding us. The most interesting civic experiment in the world was failing not just its own people, but failing all of mankind. And what would good government look like? In the following letters, Hamilton, Madison, and Jay would express the need for a union of the states, an energetic set of governing institutions, and a true republican form of government. Hamilton appeals to the people's reflections and choices. The crisis at hand called for an honest deliberation of a new constitution. The old had passed. In Federalist number 1, Hamilton sets the table for good government. If good government is our aim, we too must pause, reflect, and make decisions that defy our own self-interest and imagine the good fortune of all mankind. In doing so, the grand experiment that is America continues to be interesting for all. Welcome to Mission Possible 21G. My name is Mr. Review, and I am here to make the complex simple and the confusing clear.
Hey guys, welcome to Hippiest History. So glad that you showed up again. In this lecture, kind of a mini lecture, we're going to take a look at the kind of the philosophical underpinnings of Federalist Paper number 10. And of course, the Federalist Papers are one of the most important series of essays that were ever written in the United States in terms of governmental papers, because they're being used to persuade states to ratify the Constitution. So they're really explaining not what's in the Constitution, but why the Constitution. So Federalist number 10 is written by Madison. Hamilton and John Jay write the other ones, but Madison is in charge of this puppy. And it's entitled "The Union as a Safeguard Against Domestic Faction and Insurrection." So let's take a look at it. The main purpose of this paper, if you want to kind of pick one word, is factions. And what a faction is, guys, is basically, if you go to the cafeteria table at school, you'll notice that people kind of group themselves. You might see kind of the jocks at one table, and maybe kind of the kids who do really well, the honor society kids at another table, and the whatever, you get the idea. Those are factions. And what Madison says is that in any republic or any government, people are going to kind of just inevitably kind of form factions. They're going to come together as a unit, and they're going to have common interests. And what Madison really fears is kind of the largest faction of them all. And he says the number one defining characteristic of a faction is the unequal distribution of property. So what he basically is saying here is that because of the division of property in society, and that really there's a few with a lot and a lot without a lot, that the largest faction is going to be the po. Is it going to be the po? It's going to be the poor. People without property. And if you think of Shays' Rebellion, this is kind of the idea that, you know, if the majority is the poor and they rise up, their interest might be to eat the rich. And I'm not getting into kind of like classism and, you know, class behavior and this such, but this is really what Madison says. And Madison says there's only two things. You can either control kind of the source of factions, or control the effect of factions. And you can't control the source of factions. He says that liberty is to factions as air is to fire. So you certainly can't control air, right, that feeds fire, and you certainly can't control liberty unless you want to be kind of like a stool, you know, like an idiot. So therefore, the purpose of the paper is to describe how we're going to control the effects of factions, really to protect against the tyranny, not of the few. That's kind of, you know, what many people or some people might say is that we have to worry about the few in society, the rich, the elite that are kind of controlling things. No, 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 no. Madison says you have to worry about the tyranny of the masses, of the mob, of the poor. So, therefore, we're going to control its effects with a republic. And this is really like a catch-22, because in a republic you have factions, which creates all this kind of like, you know, disdain and, you know, unevenness and yada, yada, yada. But then you need a republic to control its effects. So there's kind of like three main arguments that Madison makes. Number one, he says that if you have a large republic, and you're electing senators, you know, in large blocks and states, that the more people you have, the less chance there is for corruption, because the more accountable the leaders, the good men in society, are going to be to the people, because they have to get so many votes. If you have a very closed society, a very small republic, it's very easy for the people to be fooled, for a charlatan to come in and kind of convince them that he's going to do what's best for the country, and maybe he's only going to protect, you know, the people that are poor. So number one is to control corruption and bad behavior by having a large republic. The other idea is the larger republic you have, the larger the faction becomes, and the larger the faction becomes, the less the faction is going to be able to be unified. So in a sense, a large republic is kind of blunting the force of the faction. So therefore, one large faction really isn't going to be able to control things, because it's already kind of been split up. So if we use this in modern day and we say, well, obviously, you know, if you look at charts or something like that, you can see that, you know, the top 5% own, I don't know what it is, 75% of everything. So why don't you just get the 95% together and eat the other 5%? And the idea is, because the republic is so large, it's very hard to get that 95% to unify, because you have other kind of breakdowns in demographics and interests. Some of those people are very pro-gun, and some of them want gun control, and some of them are religious, and some of them are not, and some of them maybe want, you know, tax cuts, and maybe some of them want, I don't know, schools improved. So you've kind of taken that faction and you blunted its effect by chopping it up, by having a large faction be even larger, if that makes any sense. And the last kind of argument here is that without a large republic, not only are you going to have the problem of the tyranny of the majority, but you're not going to have a unified country. If we become factionalized to the point where it's just kind of elect your own person that represents your own views, then we're going to be heading towards civil war quite quickly. We're going to break up as a nation. So by having a large republic, and by having all of these voices kind of muted in their factions through the process, then we can stick together. We're not going to have a large enough faction to pull us apart. And of course, he's wrong. He's wrong because you're going to have kind of this slave landowner faction, states' right faction, and this kind of more northern manufacturing abolitionist faction that's eventually going to split the country apart. But union as a safeguard against domestic faction and insurrection. The main idea here, guys, is there's always going to be factions, all right? If you're free, there's going to be factions. And in order to protect the minority, and I'm not talking about the minority in terms of Hispanics or African Americans or gay Americans. I'm talking about the minority in terms of property owners and rich. In order to protect the minority from the tyranny of the majority, you need to have a large republic. And therefore, you can go kick some you-know-what! Fed number 10. Make sure that you get the main idea, and now you should go read it. Click the link below. I'll give you a couple places. Go to the Real site for real and read it. Give it a try. See if you can pull some quotes out. And then I'll give you kind of a summary so you can get a little bit more analytical with the reasons. But now you know the basic idea, and there you go. From there, you can climb the steps of learning. All right, guys, check the links below. If you haven't subscribed, WTH, you should subscribe right now. Where attention goes, energy flows. I'm out. We're spin out.
We speak student.
How to know if a source is reliable, a la Schmug. Meet Maria. She's always cutting corners. When she encounters a young man selling supposedly brand name purses out of the trunk of his car, she thinks she's found the best deal ever. Until that is, Maria discovers that Burberry handbag she covets is actually made by Barbary in China, out of plastic. Yeah. While anyone with half a brain should know that a designer clutch for sale at a street vendor isn't the real thing, well, even the savviest writers sometimes have difficulty discerning whether a source is reliable or super shady, and slim. So, how do we tell good sources from bad? Well, first off, did we pull our source off the internet? While websites can provide us with all sorts of marvelous information and cat pictures, the internet is also rife with gossip and outright lies, which is why we have to be very, very careful when using online sources. If we're pulling content from the official pages of the White House, Walmart, or a reputable newspaper like the New York Times, then the information we're using is probably safe, given that it's been uploaded with the full weight of the U.S. government, the Walton family, and the liberal media machine behind it. Wikipedia, however, does not make the cut as a reliable source. Anyone, absolutely anyone, can log on to Wikipedia and edit articles. Random blog posts with anonymous authors also don't constitute reliable sources. This brings us to our next criteria for determining reliability. Whether the source we're interested in is a book, a piece in an academic journal, or an article taken off the internet, we have to ask, who's the author? Well, the author of a reliable source will be respected in his or her field of study and will cite his or her sources so we can fact-check to our heart's content. For example, if we're writing an essay about President William Howard Taft and his enormous bathtub, you remember that story? We should look for source materials written by noted historians, Taft's family, friends, and other contemporaries, or maybe even by President Taft himself. We also need to know when a source was written in order to decide whether it's reliable or not. Say we're writing a paper about yellow fever. While medical text hailing from the era of the building of the Panama Canal might be interesting, a source penned more than 100 years ago doesn't tell us much about where yellow fever is prevalent today or why, and what people can do to protect themselves from bleeding all over the furniture. Yeah, that yellow fever is nasty. Anyway, in other words, a reliable source is appropriate to the topic and the time we're writing about. All right, well, here's another criteria for determining the reliability of a source. What's the author's purpose? Purpose, not porpoise. All right, well, some authors set out to provide an objective look at a topic. Others will have an agenda because they have very strong feelings about the subject, or perhaps because their research was sponsored by an organization with a particular outlook. It's our job when searching for sources to identify where the author is coming from, the reason they're coming from there, and if their viewpoint is reliable enough to include in our own work. For example, say we're writing a paper on pesticide use in the United States. Well, we find an article written by a biologist who claims that a particular pesticide used on corn doesn't negatively affect human health, even though a dozen other biologists in a dozen other academic papers have come to the opposite conclusion. Given how very different biologist A's stance is on our pesticide from the rest of the scientific community, it's of the utmost importance that we determine whether he's reliable or not. In this case, a quick search determines that biologist A's study was sponsored by the company that manufactures the pesticide. And yes, people do that. Sorry, biologist A, but we vote you off the island. And ever hear of ethics? Yeah. All right, we've discussed how reliable sources will have authors who know what they're talking about and who are willing to put their names on their work. Reliable sources will be relevant to our topic and will have citations that allow us to check the source's veracity. $5 word for truth. While we can look online for reliable sources, we know to be cautious about what we find on the internet. One last question. Why does it matter whether we use reliable sources or not? Well, whether we're producing a paper for school or for an employer, we're putting our names on something. We're saying that what we've written can be relied upon. When our own reputations are on the line with our peers, our teachers, our employers, etc., we must take the extra time, and really it isn't much, to make sure that the information we use to back our opinions is good and real and honest. Otherwise, well, we'll look like idiots.
Hey!
What did the buffalo say to his son as he left for school?
Bye, son. Okay, bad joke, but if you survived it, how about clicking the subscribe button below? And if you're looking for more jokes from yours truly, why not check out our website at www.shmoop.com. And if you want to get updates on what's new, well, check us out on Facebook and Twitter too. Please check our Facebook and Twitter pages. Please.